Madam Chair, I will yield the floor.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
I ask unanimous consent that if cloture is invoked on the Patterson nomination, that at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, December 16th, all post-cloture time be considered expired. The Senate then proceed to vote on confirmation of the Patterson nomination. Upon disposition of the Patterson nomination, the Senate proceed to vote on the motion to invoke cloture on the Johnson nomination. If cloture is invoked on the Johnson nomination, then all post-cloture time be yielded back, and the Senate proceed to vote on confirmation of the Johnson nomination.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Madam President, Madam President, we're going to have 2 votes at noon today. After that, the next vote would be at 5:30 on Monday. There will be a series of votes on Monday. Mr. President, as I indicated this morning, the Republican leader and I have spent some time together, and I think we've had a productive discussion on the schedule. This schedule has been extremely difficult for everyone. We worked out a schedule that allows for the next set of votes, which will occur at noon today, be the last votes of this week. We agreed that on Monday evening the Senate will vote on the matters that we would have voted on the rest of today and this weekend. So on Monday at 5:30 in the afternoon, the Senate will vote on Patterson, Johnson, and then one would be on the cloture on Johnson, and then it would be confirmation. We're doing our utmost to finish our business here a week from today so that we can go home for Christmas. So we'll be in session Sunday afternoon. There'll be no votes on Sunday. The next roll call, I repeat for third time, will be 5:30 Monday. On Tuesday, we'll begin consideration of the budget. On Wednesday, the defense bill. And after that, we'll address further nominations, of which the most important one is Janet Yellen to be on the Federal Reserve. The others, I will work with Senator McConnell. We'll file on a number of them, see how many we can get done. I personally thank the senators for cooperation this week and next week as we work through these important matters. And I know, Madam President, that there's a lot of work we have to do to get back to regular order. We'll see what happens with the defense bill that we're going to vote on and the budget bill. But I'm satisfied that we've made progress. So I now ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn until 1 p.m. on Sunday, December 15th. That following the prayer and the pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired. Adjourned proceedings be approved to date. time for the two leaders be reserved for the use later in the day, and the Senate convene for legislative business only.
Is there an objection? Without objection?
So just make sure everyone understands we're going to have votes at noon on today, and then Monday. Madam President, the distinguished senator from Nebraska was speaking and I interrupted him. If he has more to say, I'm going to relinquish the floor. If he has more to say, he can certainly do that. I have no right to suggest the absence of quorum, so we'll wait and see what remaining time would be.
Madam President.
Senator from Mississippi.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the order for the quorum be dispensed with.
The Senate is currently not in a quorum call.
Madam President, since the Senate has had an opportunity to be given an update on our status of negotiation on a farm bill, it's my pleasure to announce that since our first conference committee meeting in October, we've been working to reach an agreement on a new 5-year farm bill, a bill that we can take to the House and Senate and in collaboration and working through our differences, make progress and establish a framework of government support and assistance for our agriculture sector to continue to contribute in an important way in the economic life of our nation. I'm pleased to say that we're making progress, but there are still some decisions that lie ahead of us. I'm hopeful that on both sides of the aisle in both bodies we can come together on a farm bill agreement that will reform and modernize programs, produce budget savings at the same time, and provide certainty about the government's role to producers and consumers alike. I might also add that related to this is an interest that many homeowners have in flood control, insurance, protection, government assistance. There's a reform bill that I'm pleased to have co-sponsored that would delay premium rates temporarily until we can review and make sure that these changes are going to serve the interests of homeowners and landowners in areas that are threatened by natural disasters. We don't want to draw a line on a map arbitrarily or turn that over to a federal government agency without fully considering all of the ramifications. We must put the flood insurance program on a path to fiscal solvency, and one way to do that is to ensure that it is a good deal in terms of investment and prospective return on investment for individuals as well as communities. On another subject, Madam President, I recently had an opportunity to review some correspondence and notes we've made about calls we've received from constituents on the subject of the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act. This is a major piece of health care legislation, as everybody knows. It affects insurance companies, it affects individuals, it affects the entire country probably in a very, very important area of concern. In order to comply with the law's requirements, a family could see their monthly premiums increase from $700 to almost $1,400, which is an increase of more than 90%. To put that in perspective, it's more than $16,000 per year that a family would have to spend on health insurance premiums alone. These figures are just not affordable for most Americans. So there's sticker shock associated with our effort to help improve and expand our nation's health insurance programs. But I'm not sure that we're on the right track yet. These figures just signal to us how serious the implications are, and we must address this program and these proposals with very serious care and diligence. Monthly premiums, for example, do not include co-payments or out-of-pocket expenses. It does include the cost of several health benefits deemed essential by the administration, regardless of the fact that many people do not need or want to pay for these services. So one constituent suggested an interesting question in a question to me: why can't we, the policy owners, decide what benefits and deductibles we want? Well, I think they're right. They ought to have that right, and they ought to be given that choice. Choice is what families should have when it comes to health insurance. Unfortunately, the freedom to make a decision is based on what is in the best interest is no longer an option for millions of Americans who have to search for new insurance coverage, pay for benefits they will not use, and potentially even give up the doctors that they know and they want to keep. Despite assurances by the President that people who like their health insurance will be able to keep it, we've learned that the administration has known for at least 3 years that millions of Americans would lose the health insurance that they currently have and that they would like to keep as advertised. Reports also indicate that there are an estimated 15 million people facing a potential coverage gap because many currently have insurance from the individual market but have received cancellation notices because their policies don't meet the law's requirements. Since the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act was enacted, incidentally without a single Republican vote in 2010, the administration has struggled to meet its own deadlines for implementation of the law. The ongoing problems with the law's enrollment website conspicuously foreshadow the more significant failures that can be expected as this law is implemented. The most recent Marketplace Enrollment Report, which was released by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, states that less than 365,000 individuals have selected plans from the state and federal marketplaces since October 1st. It's been estimated that more than 47 million non-elderly Americans were uninsured in 2012. This means that less than 1% of the uninsured population in the U.S. has selected a health insurance plan by way of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. We are told that it is likely that on January 1 of this next year, more Americans will be uninsured than were uninsured at the time that the health care law was enacted. This law's primary intent was to expand coverage, to encourage insurance, but it seems to be failing on both counts. The implementation of the law's mandates reveals that the legislation will fail to reduce health care costs as well. In 2013, we are projected to spend $2.9 trillion on health care in the United States. This is approximately 18% of the entire U.S. economy. National health care expenditures are expected to increase substantially in the years beyond that. Health insurance is just one component of our nation's very complex health care system. And we could do better, should do better, and I think we can do better than this initial work product. We should get together, find common ground to improve the quality of health care in our country, to improve access, and reduce overall health care costs. We owe that to our constituents, our national economic interests, and to the future of quality health care in the United States. Madam President, I invite other senators to come discuss this or other issues that we've identified as important for our consideration. In the meantime, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
While we wait for senators to come to the floor, an update. The Senate has been in session continuously since Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Senators have been debating and voting on a series of judicial and executive nominations. Changes to Senate rules have resulted, according to New York Times, in Republicans furious that Democrats last month stripped away most of their power to filibuster presidential nominations, are using every procedural barricade available to them in the Senate's two-century-old rule book, forcing it to run the clock as long as possible while a series of President Obama's nominees are being considered. Politico says it this way: at issue is the considerable anger that remains among Republicans over Majority Leader Reid's decision to change the Senate rules and eliminate the filibuster on most of Obama's picks for courts and the executive branch. As of this morning, some changes to the Senate schedule. Senator Reid has updated the schedule after a vote expected in the noon hour. The nomination being considered is that of Heather Ann Higginbottom of the District of Columbia to be Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources. There will be no further votes this afternoon. There will be no Saturday, which would be a rare session for the Senate, tomorrow. The Senate will come in on Sunday, however, at 1 p.m. for some legislative business. Next votes scheduled for Monday, including a confirmation vote, a cloture and confirmation vote for Jay Johnson. He is President Obama's nominee to lead the Department of Homeland Security. Senator Reid earlier today announced that he wants to work on the budget. The House yesterday passed a two-year $85 billion budget agreement by a vote of 332 to 94, and also on defense appropriations. The budget work scheduled for Tuesday at this point, and the defense scheduled for Wednesday. We'll continue to look in on the Senate floor. You're watching live coverage on C-SPAN 2.
Senator from Tennessee.
It's my understanding we may be in a quorum call, and I'd like unanimous consent. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to vitiate the quorum call.
Without objection.
Madam President, I thank you and thank the way you've dealt with all of us since you've been here. I rise today to talk about discussions that have been taking place in Vienna over the last 4 days relative to the Iran P5+1 discussions. And I know that each of us in this body focuses on different topics and based on the committee assignments that we have, but I did want to point out that reports have come out today and last night that the technical experts who've been meeting around the deal that has been announced still are having difficulties trying to understand how to implement this deal that was written down on 4 pages. And I say this to just talk about the fact that there are many in this body on both sides of the aisle that would like to weigh in on this issue. And I realize that the administration has expressed concerns as to what type of weighing in they think might be harmful to the discussions. And I think there are many of us who understand those things and have tried to figure out a way to weigh in an appropriate way. I think just to bring people's memories back into focus, one of the concerns that we've all had leading up until the announcement of this deal has been the amount of time, if you will, that remains before Iran reaches a status of, in essence, being a nuclear-armed state. And so it was very important, I think, to all of us as we heard the announcement of this interim deal that we actually understand the time frames that were involved. And I know that many people were alarmed by this interim agreement because, in fact, there was a tacit understanding that Iran, which has been a rogue nation, no doubt is, if this agreement continues to go through, is going to be a state that will be allowed to enrich uranium, much in the face of the 1, 2, 3 agreements that we negotiate around the world, trying to establish a gold standard with countries to keep them from doing that. This agreement, let's face it, I think that Wendy Sherman yesterday in testimony to the Banking Committee, and I can assure you every single Iranian official that's been involved in these negotiations understand that what the United States of America with other countries has agreed to is to allow Iran to be able to enrich uranium at some level when a final deal is actually done. I think one of the concerns that many of us have right now is that this interim deal either becomes the norm or, as the previous nuclear czar to the Obama administration, Gary Seymour, has said, that we really just begin a series of rolling agreements and we never get to the place of establishing an end state. I hate to say this, but yesterday, Wendy Sherman, I think that many of us have certainly conducted discussions with the White House and been in classified briefings. And one of the things that we've really wanted to put in place, and I think Carl Levin in a meeting at the White House spoke most clearly to this, and that is, in order to alleviate that kind of thing occurring, we need to have a firm beginning date and a firm end date. And he said that end date should be 6 months, which is, by the way, what the agreed announcement said. I think what is dismaying to many people in this body is we're now finding out that not only is there not an end date, but addendums that can be mutually agreed to. In other words, there is no end date to this agreement. We're now finding out, based on testimony yesterday from Wendy Sherman, we don't even know when the start date is, that officials cannot even agree as to when the beginning of this agreement is going to be and when the implementation begins. And it's pretty amazing to me that we could spend months negotiating over an issue that is so important to us and so important to the world. And yet, after it's concluded, we don't even really know when the agreement begins. And we certainly, because of the text of the agreement, know that it does not have an end date. I've tried to listen to the concerns that the administration has. I think I've demonstrated since I've been here that I really want to seek understanding, number one, but also try to use that understanding to solve problems. And so our office has worked hard to develop an amendment. It's an amendment that establishes a firm end date, but it also describes the end state. That's what this amendment does. I think that people on both sides of the aisle, I don't think it, I know it because of public expressions, have been very concerned that this interim agreement already violates the UN Security Council resolutions that this administration agreed to back in 2010, as did the other members of the Security Council. And many people are concerned that if we start with an agreement that no doubt expressly violates the UN Security Council resolution, and it doesn't have even a clear start date or end date, there's a lot of concerns, as you can imagine, that we'll never get to that place that countries have agreed to back in 2010 as it relates to where Iran's end state should be. Another concern that people have is as we begin lifting these sanctions, and let's face it, Congress, the administration, and the international community actually has done a very good job together trying to figure out a way of implementing appropriately sanctions that have put pressure on Iran and have brought them to the place that they now are. But I think the concerns, and I actually believe them to be, matter of fact, Senator Reid, Jack Reid, yesterday expressed these concerns in a banking hearing. Once you begin to basically say that Iran is not a rogue nation, that they're being brought helpfully into the international community, once you begin lifting even a minor portion of those sanctions, countries and companies around the world are going to clamor to do business because they see that in the very near future additional sanctions are going to be lifted. And just by virtue of that occurring, the sanctions begin to dissipate at a rapid pace. This is something, again, that has been expressed in a bipartisan way. So, I have an amendment. I'm the ranking member on Foreign Relations Committee, which means nothing other than I spend a lot of time on these issues and working with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to find solutions. As a matter of fact, we haven't passed anything out of our committee yet that hasn't been bipartisan. And we have coming over, I understand, an NDAA bill that has typically been the vehicle that we all express ourselves on these kinds of issues. And it's my understanding that the majority leader has decided himself, I will say much to the consternation of my friends on the other side of the aisle, but certainly to the consternation of people on my side of the aisle, that he's not going to allow any amendments, that he himself has decided what is best for this body. So after spending months and months and just coming from the region recently and working with the presiding officer and others on so many diplomatic and foreign policy issues together in a bipartisan way, I'm now serving in a body that has the vehicle that typically is used to express ourselves on foreign policy issues. I don't have the right to raise an amendment. The body, by the way, may decide that they don't support it. I mean, that's what happens around here. You debate issues and you decide whether you want to support them. By the way, the amendment that I'm offering doesn't add sanctions. All it does is define when the end is going to be, which, by the way, every world leader has stated is very, very important because of what is occurring on the ground in Iran. And it establishes a minimum end state, which is what the UN Security Resolution already says. So I'm one senator, I realize, and there are 99 others, and I'm sure that there are many people in this body that would like to express themselves on issues that are not deemed to be partisan or deemed to be political, but just to express themselves on policy that they believe to be important to the country. But the majority leader, on his own, has decided that that is not going to be the case. Yesterday I was riding the elevator with a senator that I came in with. I came in with 9 Democrats and 1 Republican. I was the only Republican, excuse me. I didn't come in with any other Republicans. I was it. And we've had a lot of fun, and we get together once a year and talk about that, and candidly, relations between us, generally speaking, have been very, very good for the 7 years that I've been here. And this one senator that I've actually worked with more than others of the group on so many issues said to me that what happened on the Senate floor a few weeks ago, where the majority overruled their own parliamentarian, overruled with a simple majority vote, which means there are no rules in the Senate anymore. This person said to me that, look, Bob, it wasn't personal. Well, what's amazing to me is that the way this Senate is run is not personal to my friends on the other side of the aisle. The fact that, like lemmings in so many cases, they would just follow the majority leader and let him decide what this body is going to vote on, and let him decide what policies this Senate is going to put into place. I don't understand that. We've all worked hard to be here, and we all work hard to represent our constituents. And I think we all work hard not to disrespect ourselves, disrespect the office we hold, I won't say we've all worked hard not to disrespect this institution, because I believe what happened greatly disrespected this institution. And certainly, hopefully, we work hard not to disrespect the citizens that we serve with. But what I find myself in total dismay over is that my friends on the other side of the aisle don't deem it personal that on the one vehicle that we typically express ourselves most on foreign policy issues, and at a time when we have so many foreign policy issues that in a bipartisan way people have concerns about, that they would decide to just let the majority leader decide what we're going to vote on, when we're going to vote on it, and if it's even appropriate to have a vote at all. So, Mr. President, here we are. We have witnessed the many, many problems that have dismayed both sides of the aisle relative to the rollout of the health care bill. And I think that everybody in this body would recognize I haven't been down here taking cheap shots at that. Look, I'm concerned about the citizens of our state and what they're dealing with relative to this policy, and hearing the distress calls of people who, you know, have had their insurance canceled and maybe have had a quadruple bypass and are concerned about getting on. And I know all of us are involved in trying to help those citizens that are in dismay and very concerned be successful in actually being able to get on the exchanges. But here right now, seriously, we're watching a major foreign policy issue be rolled out by this administration with many of the same problems. We don't have a start date. We don't have an end date. We haven't even broached the toughest issues with Iran over what the end state is going to be. And I think that is a tremendous disservice to our nation. It is a tremendous disservice to the countries with which we work with all around the world. It is a tremendous disservice for this body not to express its will. I know the chairman of the committee had acted as if he wanted to participate in somehow making sure that Congress was heard on this in a way that does not blow up the negotiations. I think everyone here wants to see a diplomatic solution. Everyone here. I don't know of anybody in this body that doesn't want to see that happen. But also know, and I think the administration knows this well, the actions of this body, candidly, over the years, is one of the main reasons that we are where we are. But again, I'll close. I know I'm getting redundant. Our majority leader, in his wisdom, and I know the majority leader decides who serves on committees, and he decides who the chairman is of those committees, and I realize that with that you have a great ability to keep people from expressing their will or rising up and really wanting to do something in a bipartisan way. I'm coming to understand, especially in recent weeks, what bipartisan means to our majority leader is whatever he decides is bipartisan. And even though the majority of the people in this body would really like to weigh in on this policy, to do so in an appropriate way so that we do not, in fact, do something that does something to harm the negotiation, but does something to strengthen our hand in these negotiations, that will not occur. To me, that is a disservice to this body. It is a disservice to this nation. It is a disservice to every member. And no doubt, when each of us do not have the opportunity to express ourselves through amendments, what that really means is the folks we represent back home have no right to have their concerns expressed or voted on. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and notice the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
While we wait for a senator to come to the floor to speak, a quick update. The Senate has been in session since 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. The vote coming up at noon today is planned to be the last vote of the day, and it will be to vote on the nomination of Heather Higginbottom to be a Deputy Secretary of State. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said they reached a decision in the last hour to push the other 10 votes on President Obama's nominees to Monday at 5:30. The Senate will not be in session tomorrow, Saturday, but will be in session on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern with no voting. Leader Reid also announced his legislative priorities for the Senate, including the budget agreement and the defense programs bill, both of which passed the House yesterday. The Senate's expected to wrap up by the end of next week, and you are watching live Senate coverage here on C-SPAN 2.
Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to the order of February 29, 1960, the hour of 12 noon having arrived,